Good almost afternoon to you. Welcome. It's the SitRep for today, which is the 17th of January 2023. What is this, like third or fourth of the year that I've done? I don't even know. I should start keeping count of these things. Anyway, I'm not. Welcome to the SitRep for today. It's about midday here. For those of you who haven't joined this before, this is where we go through news stories that I found and people have sent through to me from the past couple of days. And we pull it apart, or at least look at it and see what lessons we can learn from these sorts of news articles that are coming in, so we can figure out which way the wind is blowing and best prepare ourselves as prepared-mindedness human beings. You get what I'm saying. Anyway, let's get on with it today. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate to all of you who jump on here, and hello to you, Renee C. Welcome on YouTube. Yes, thank you very much for joining me, whether you're joining me on YouTube, on Instagram, both of which are going live right now, or if you're listening to this on the podcast audio version later, which I'll upload as soon as I finish. Hope you're all well in the world. Hope everything's going well in your part of the world. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of interesting things going on today. So let's jump into it, and we'll start in New Zealand. I like to try and bring in Australian, New Zealand stories. It's one of the reasons I think I started this, among many reasons, why add my voice to the miasma of voices that are already out on the internet. It's because I just didn't see a lot of Australian, New Zealand centric type information going out there. A lot of North America, a bit of UK, bit of European sort of stuff, but not that this is specifically aimed at Australia and New Zealand. I just like to add some of those things in there. G'day to you, Alpha, over in the States there. Thanks for joining me. Glad you could make it to the live today. All right, so in New Zealand, what's happening with eggs? It's not very excellent right now on the egg front. We're getting smashed. In fact, one of the only places that I can see where egg prices aren't going through the roof, they are increasing, but they're not going through the roof, is here in Australia. Our egg prices are increasing. They have increased some parts of Australia quite rapidly, but on the whole, they're not going up anywhere near what they're going up in the US. And New Zealand right now is having an egg crisis. So this one was sent to me through my main source on Instagram, so thank you very much for that. It's coming from bbc.com. Self-inflicted egg shortage in New Zealand. The egg shortage, quote, the egg shortage in shops has triggered a buying frenzy for pet chickens. Searches for the birds on New Zealand's biggest online auction site have doubled over the past week, and their cost has risen even more. A laying hen usually sells for about 18 New Zealand dollars, Kiwi dollariwis, Kiwi, I don't know, some funny looking money over there. 18 New Zealand bucks for a bird, but the price is now, get this, 80, from 18 to 80 bucks a chicken. That is quite a rise. This is sort of stuff though, that like this is exactly the reason why I get up here and talk about this sort of stuff and try and make it more Australian, New Zealand centric, because that's where I'm from. But as a kind of a warning, like I said at the start of today, what we're trying to do is have a look at what's happening in the news and see if we can, see which way the wind's blowing and get ahead of the curve. So right now we're already behind the curve. Australian chickens I know have definitely gone up, but I wouldn't imagine that they've gone 4 times the price of what they previously were. So yeah. Peter Rouse, who's in New Zealand now, says Jacinta's still missing. Jacinta, their PM, who's in the news quite a bit, hasn't been in the news apparently. And there's no news about her not being in the news. Interesting. Maybe she had a heart attack or something. Who knows? Seems to be a bit of that going around. Peter Rouse also says, not true, just picked up 2 hens for 15 bucks each. So bargain there. You can still find them out there. This particular story, I believe, is, I can't remember exactly where it was. It's somewhere in the North Island, though, and somewhere around one of the major cities. It was Auckland or Wellington, I believe. So Yeah. And like you've rightly put there, some people online trying to sell them for that price, but no one is buying them. No one should buy them, really. At $80 a chicken, you wouldn't want to. But this is the kind of thing where people always capitalize on, i.e., my dear old dog, my companion for about 14 years, was getting towards the end of her life a couple of years ago. And so, I was pretty attached to the dog, so I decided to get another dog, golden retriever. I originally, 14 years ago, got that golden retriever for $500. The going price was $6,000+. That was because of the COVID tax, and it's because all the sheeple NPC people all of a sudden were locked inside their own houses, had finished Netflix, and were having to deal with the crisis that is their own lives, their own psyche, and they were going, I do not like this person that I have to hang with all the time. This is horrific. Quick, let's have a kid. Let's get a dog or three. And as a result, prices shot up through the roof. So prices have come back down, or are coming back down, but it has definitely bumped things up like this. So, this is the sort of stuff that you want to look at in the news when you're seeing things like this. Okay, egg prices going up, food shortages. Eventually, your everyday people, your people who are not quite as switched on to sort of things, are going to figure out like, oh, this is not good. And they're going to want to buy things up, and they're going to trigger shortages. They're going to panic buy. And this is the essential part. People often think when they say prepper, you're like some sort of freak panic buyer and you're storing and hoarding. But that's not what it's all about at all. It's actually about future planning. It's about looking forward at these sorts of things and going, or for me at least, it's about looking forward at these sorts of things and going, hey, I'm not the kind of person, like if some sort of pandemic happened or something and people freaked out about toilet paper, I don't want to be in the stores trying to fight other people for toilet paper. So I've got plenty of toilet paper built up, but I've also got other ways to clean my a-hole without toilet paper. It's not the only thing that's on my mind. Just as an example, these sorts of things, I always like to highlight them. These are runs, what we would call a runs, not a toilet paper pun there, but this is a run on something. So when people find out that something's in short supply, inevitably it triggers this little psychological program that we have as human beings to grab it, get it quick. Doesn't matter what it is, we always see it. Could be on toilet paper, could be on eggs, could be on butter, it could be on money. And whenever these examples come up, I like to highlight them to everyone to show you that, like, get ahead of the curve. Get ahead of the curve. Get your own chickens. Sorry about that. Just had a call come in on my phone. So that cuts out Instagram, annoyingly. It's from an unknown number too. If you're calling, FYI, if you ever call me from an unknown number, chances are I'm not going to pick up. Renee C says, imagine all the unwanted pets now. Yes, and I did actually talk about a story about that, where there was a huge increase in the last 18 months of like pounds. Is that what you call them? I guess pounds. Are they still called pounds? Lost dog homes were swamped, absolutely swamped with dogs, and it sends me crazy. Because it's because of what I was talking about before. So many people went out and got pets or got things, got stuff. Went out and bought petrol generators. Went out and bought home gym gear because they were freaking out and they were like, "Oh, I'm by myself," or "I'm in a home and I have to deal with myself." And they're the kind of people who have never actually sat down and looked inward before and had to deal with their own shit, and will do anything to get away from it. Literally anything. And as a result, all those things went up in price. As a result, if you wanted to get those things, they're probably in short supply, and so you couldn't. And then the market got flooded with them afterwards. So that's fine with gym equipment. I don't care about that. That's fine with, I guess, toilet paper. But you can't really send that back. But it's not fine when it comes to pets or animals, as far as I'm concerned. Peter Rouse says, I figure 1,000 rolls should be enough now. Yes. Also, think about storage of this sort of stuff. It's great to store things, but make sure you store things safely. For a long time, I lived in a share house and I bought a whole heap, like all of us pitched in, bought a whole heap of toilet paper years and years ago. Anyway, we all moved out of that house and they were all like, well, what do we do with all this toilet paper? We don't want it. And I said, oh, I'll take it because, I'm a bit of a prepper. But I was bouncing around house to house, had it in some storage, got wet, ruined the whole the whole lot. Like, probably I'd say 2/3 of it were destroyed. So just as a reminder too, just while that's fresh in my mind, destroyed toilet paper. Did end up using it for some purpose, but not toilet paper purpose, not wiping my bum. Just a reminder, when we're storing, when we're doing these things, doing it safely, doing it smartly when it comes to food, when it comes to toilet paper, when it comes to anything that you're storing long term, make sure you do it safely. Yeah. Peter Rouse says, I volunteered at a no-kill shelter in Los Angeles. So many dogs were dumped back then. Could only imagine now. Be horrific. Anyway, moving right along. Western officials now confirming additional Russian mobilization and likely escalation of conflict. Well, I mean, if you're part of the Western officials who are en masse pumping weapons of war into Ukraine right now, it's not exactly a brilliant prediction to say that there's an escalation of conflict. You're part of it. You're doing the escalation. So no duh. But this is what we've been seeing. There was talk about this 500,000 extra Russian troops being put on the ground. Western officials are coming out with it now and saying, yep, it's 100% happening. Whether it is 100% happening or not, I don't know, because remember what I was saying about this in the first place. This was coming from Ukraine sources primarily. I'm sure that Russia is investing more of its resources and human beings into this conflict, into this war. Like, that's without a doubt. But also, whenever I see anything from Western sources, I always go, okay, like, this is propaganda as well. Too many people, I think, read anything from Western sources as 100% truth and perfect, i.e., yes, of course, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. We must have a war over in Iraq again. So, they would never lie to us, but anything that comes out of Russia is 100% lying and propaganda. It's propaganda and lies from both sides, just so you know. But that's part of what I do is I encourage you to do this as well. If you are the kind of person who wants to look at news stories, wants to look at information around the world, and I'm not saying you do have to be, you probably live a much happier, healthier life if you don't most of the time. But if you do want to look at this, cast a wide net. Look at as many sources as you can, trying to understand where those sources sit on the spectrum or in the field of who they might benefit by putting this information out, and then weigh it accordingly. All right, I've got a lot of stories here, so I'm going to have to skip over a few because I don't have a lot of time. By the way, 8 o'clock tonight, I'm going live with that Insta Chick, and we're going to be talking preps. And we're going to focus it on something. This might end up becoming a bit of a series of lives or even YouTube videos that we do, but it will only be on Instagram tonight. Basically, I put it out there. It's in my stories, so you can check out on Instagram on my stories. Let us know what you want to talk about. So I'll put a number of options there in a question box. So people have been putting in what they want to hear about us prepping for. And it's two very different perspectives. I'm obviously a prepper, ex-military person, been living in the security sphere in that kind of world for decades. That Insta Chick is, not so much that. Doesn't have any of that background, relatively new to prepping, a couple of years, but also very much down the line of somebody who is living a normal life in Australia, but living also with an eye or living alternatively, I guess you would say, not part of the mainstream, not part of the normal narrative. Rick Differentia says, do you follow much about Australian mining and the future of it? A little bit. I mean, not a whole heap, but I do a little bit. From the perspective of I'm always looking at things in the economy. I'm always looking at where money goes, because I think if you can track where money goes, you're going to have a pretty good understanding of what's coming next. And also geopolitical sort of stuff as well. But apart from that, I'm not like heavily invested in mining stocks or anything in Australia. I'm definitely not a miner myself. So apart from that, I don't know too much, but I know a little bit. But if there's a specific question you've got, fire it out and I'll see what I can do to at least posture some hypotheses. UK, here's really, this was really super interesting. So this was sent to me by my source. Super interesting. A lot of news reports about Leopard tanks and other main battle tanks being potentially pushed into the Ukraine conflict. And that's what I was talking about, like Western sources going, oh, the war's going to escalate because of Putin. I'm like, well, the war's going to escalate because you're putting main battle tanks in there as well. So that's also going to exacerbate the problem. This was a really interesting one that popped up and then got taken down. So whenever that happens, that's super interesting. So this is mainstream media. I think this is the Mirror from UK. The UK to send Apache attack helicopters, Apaches to Ukraine now. Like super random reporting on this. I saw this and was like, wait, what? And went through it and was like, oh, that's been taken down. That's not there anymore. This is the sort of stuff mainstream media, everyone assumes mainstream media is thorough in what they investigate, that everything has to go through checks and balances. They don't. They shotgun so much stuff out, and then when they stuff up, they delete things and take it away. Nothing ever goes away on the internet, though. If you put it up there, chances are someone saw it. So they were talking about Apaches being deployed into Ukraine. That's huge for a number of reasons, right? I saw that and I was like, you don't just chuck an Apache helicopter into a war, right? An Apache helicopter takes a huge amount of resources, and you don't put a Apache helicopter. It's got pilots for starters. I don't know if they were intending on training Ukrainian pilots, but that takes time. That takes a lot of time. So were they going to use UK pilots or some third country pilots? There's support staff. There are people who have to repair it and make sure it's maintained and running. There is, fueling. There is building of the correct infrastructure around it. And like I said, you're not just putting an Apache there. You're going to put a squadron of Apaches there and probably support craft around them as well. So it was a huge undertaking. And for somebody to just come out with this, I thought, this is odd on so many levels. It almost looked like this was something that was happening in the background, and then somebody leaked it and then went, I should not have told you that. You need to take that down now. And they backpedaled on it very quickly. Or somebody just misheard something and interpreted it the wrong way, which is what I think it was. I think, they are going to deploy stuff like this, but maybe not in the next week put an Apache helicopter on the ground in Ukraine. Peter Rouse says Apaches are easy targets for Russians. Alpha says the Apache are supposed to be the E model, which are the most advanced of them. Peter Rouse says they take an enormous amount of servicing, and I am, painfully aware of that. I've seen it all before. And Alpha also says super mission creep, which this is classic mission creep where it's almost like Chinese whispers have brought this forward from something that you would speculate about this in 18 months' time. That being utilized on the battlefield. Anyway, interesting stuff. Stories getting put up, taken down. Always find that interesting. Romania is to receive NATO systems to monitor Russian activity. So they're looking at getting AWACS. AWACS are reconnaissance aircraft that can fly around. Apparently, they should be delivered to Bucharest today, or today their time. It's some interesting stuff. More NATO resources being pushed further east. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but putting up these sorts of things, and the reason I'm looking at this sort of stuff is you can see an expansion of this war coming, I can see an expansion of this war coming. It would not surprise me. I'll put it that way. If this war was to spill out of Ukraine or intensify dramatically within Ukraine within the next month and a half, I'm not looking at any statistical data there. This is my take on it, just so you know. I'll try and add in where it's my take. So you can feel free to comment nasty comments at me. You're an idiot. Feel free to do that when it's my opinion. They took down the story about the truth of what happened to the apartment building being hit in Ukraine. There's actually been a number of those where they came out and said, Russia hit this, or this side hit this apartment building. Usually it's Russia, killed civilians, blah, blah, blah. And then you see, that was actually Ukraine munitions. Poof, story's gone. Story is gone. So there's been a number of them. Turkish FM reprimands, that's the foreign minister, reprimands Scandinavian nations. So this is long-running story here. Sweden, Finland want to get into NATO, put in their bids for it. Turkey vetoed it, said, nope, not going to happen. And it's to do basically with Turkey wanting to, I guess, extradite and punish people from Syria who, as far as I can tell, were also Swedish or Finnish nationals. And so they went there and got arrested and punished in those countries. But Turkey wants to take care of it. And Turkey punish hard when it comes to these sorts of people because they're fighting against Turkey or Turkish needs or wants, I guess would be the way to put it. So anyway, this sort of tit for tat's been happening for a while now. Turkey, Sweden, not on good standing at the moment. What's increased recently in the last few days of this was that somebody burnt an effigy of the Prime Minister, the Turkish Prime Minister. And so now Turkey's using that as a big, wow, look what they're doing. This is horrific. I mean, I'm not really here or there on people burning effigies of people or flags and stuff like that. I don't think it's a great idea. I think it's dumb personally, but for a country to get up in arms about some other country burning stuff in their country, I'm always like, this isn't about that. This is about Turkey using this as an excuse, I think, to bring more pressure to bear against Sweden. So it's another adding to that. But the geopolitical situation here is what's important to me, is that it looks like it takes a step back for Sweden joining NATO. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying, if we're looking at it, and NATO, sort of strengthening up at the moment, that that bid for Sweden to go into NATO has definitely taken a step back because of this. Another one sent to me from my main source. Most of these actually that I've been talking about was sent to me from my main source. Peter Rouse, just quickly on this. Peter Rouse says, didn't burn pictures of Trump, ? Which, this is my point exactly. If somebody burnt a picture of Trump, would the US sanction them? No, of course they wouldn't. It's such a farcical idea that somebody would. But the political sphere is not an even playing field. I would just put it that way. Europe stuck with high energy prices thanks to who? You guessed it, Putin. It's all his fault, of course. The boss of Norwegian energy giant Equinor has said he does not expect gas and electricity bills to return to the levels they were before COVID. Anders Oppedal told the BBC the transition from fossil fuels towards less damaging sources of energy meant costs will remain high. I just want to repeat that little bit there. The transition from fossil fuels towards less damaging sources of energy meant costs will remain high. This is the price we pay, I guess, for wanting green energy. And I'll reiterate this again, in case you haven't heard me say it before. I'm not against green energy. I like it. I love the idea. I run it here in my house. I'm also on the grid and use, I don't know what we're using right here. I would assume it is part hydro, part coal. Anyway, I must research this. Green technologies are great. If you're a believer that think we can switch to green energies and live a utopian lifestyle as soon as we do it, I think you actually have replaced the coal that we're burning into your head. That's where that coal now resides as replacement for your brain, because that just does not add up. We do not have the technology right now, and it will cost. What he's talking about here is high cost money-wise, but it will cost on so many other levels, including human lives. At the end of the day, it will degrade the level of society that we have. That is my belief, that it will degrade the level of society, the civilization that we have will come down if we want to switch straight to green technologies. I think it's a lot further out than people actually think it is. Peter Rouse says, what energy is less damaging? I can only think of nuclear. I will not disagree with you on that, sir. I also think the same. How do they think solar panels are made, let alone the batteries? Exactly. EVs as well. All these technologies. I mean, the batteries in EVs, but every other part of EVs is electronic vehicles as well. Like, do you not understand how these things are made? It's not green the entire way. It doesn't work that way at all. I think they're banking on AI making advancements in tech, says Alpha. I think so too. I mean, this is the faith argument. Essentially, you can argue that this has been throughout time, that people put their faith in a higher power, whatever it is. It's religious thinking, and I'm not saying that's necessarily negative or wrong. But I think it's also worthwhile not to put all your eggs in that basket. We will be saved. There is a savior out there. Something will save us. And the modern narrative is, thou Lord, thy name who art AI, / the prophet of AI, Elon Musk, will save us all from the downfall that we are currently facing. And I don't know. Stop calling me. Apologies about that again. Somebody is trying to get a hold of me on the phone. Not going to happen until I finish this. Anyway, moving right ahead. All right, this is the big one, because this is happening right now in Australia. OPSEC. I want to talk about this. This was sent to me by my main source again on Instagram, and this is probably one of the most troubling and interesting articles that I've read in a long time when it comes to prepping. Because I talk about this. I talk about self-reliance a lot. I talk about self-responsibility, and I talk about the ability to not outsource all your needs, but try and actually take a hold of them and be as resilient as possible within yourself. And I talk about this food, and I say water, and I say power, electricity, and I say shelter. And I also say security, looking after your own shit, being able to look after yourself, having maybe the physical ability, whatever it looks like for you to secure your own being, to secure your family, to secure your home, your domicile, and to maybe even secure or help secure your community if need be. But at the very least, knowing how to secure yourself, having self-defense. And I'm going to give you another little concept here called OPSEC. OPSEC is something we were smashed with when we were in the military. Operational security. It's the security of information, how much information you put out into a space, because information can be leveraged can be used against you. So you think about some bearded, tattooed idiot who's on the internet talking to people. I'm like, oh, grow my own food and I'll do this and do that. I'm telling all this information to people. And for years and years and years, I did not tell people this information because I didn't want people to know that I prep. Because if something went wrong, I didn't want people rocking at my house. But for various reasons, I now get up and do it. And that's part of the price that I've decided to pay for this. You know that I do it. I mean, you probably don't know where I live, but that's okay. Also, I've taken a lot of steps into securing my own area, I guess, myself, my family, my space around me. So I can secure this. OPSEC's a big thing. People are putting information out there. I'm encouraging people to grow. This is, again, another reason why I encourage a lot more people to grow their own food. Newtown Community Gardens president, Nick Stevens, so this is in Australia, said that while the theft of one or two vegetable plants does happen from time to time, he is concerned about an increase in the number of systematic threats. Quote, last weekend, a member found that every single lettuce in the garden had been cut, which would have been about 50 to 60 head of lettuce. Number of stories coming out about this. This is from abc.net.au. Vegetable patch thieves strike at some, and as some blaming rising grocery costs of fresh fruit and veg. So think about lettuce, for example. There was a stage where lettuce was $11 to $12 a head. It's not anymore, but it did hit those peaks here in Australia for a little bit. So yeah, people are targeting people's home gardens now, which always happens. That's always happened, but it seems to be on the increase. Anecdotally on the increase. I haven't seen any actual statistical information on it, but a lot more people are talking about it. Some key points from this story. Thefts from gardens are on the rise, with researchers blaming the rising cost of living. A researcher says a small number of people admitted to stealing or digging through people's rubbish in a desperate act to put food on the table. Penalties for trespass can include a fine or a term of imprisonment, while penalties for stealing are wide-ranging, could be different. Here's another one from ABC, which was actually, I think from their radio, spate of thefts from Hobart community gardens as well. So community gardens is another thing. I like the idea of community gardens. Really, like, gives people access to a space where they can grow food if they don't have that within their own house. But spate of thefts from Hobart community gardens. It's a real grey line, because it's a community garden. Part of a community garden means the community can access it, but obviously people coming in and taking stuff, kind of wholesale, and not leaving any for anyone else. And what's this all being blamed on? The rise of cost of living. Who could have, foresaw that the rise in food price, that the cost of living would have increased? None of us could have foreseen this. Just quickly catching up some comments here. Norman Lacey says, constructing solar panels from mining the minerals to the final installation for consumers consumes more energy than they are capable of producing in their lifetime. So that's interesting stuff there. Peter Rouse says that's a good reason to have dogs when we're talking about theft from gardens, and that's certainly one of the reasons why I have dogs, and not just little yappers, but big ones that can do stuff. Solar lights with IR help and are cheap. Yes. So I've got floodlights that are triggered through movement, and I've got cameras as well set up, and I've got me. So yeah. Just sitting out there at night with my shotgun patrolling around my garden. Which I probably should do, because get rid of the slugs. They annoy you. Not with a shotgun, but be funny. Alex Jones foresaw this. Most people I know cannot identify basic veggies grown in the garden, says Renee C., which is an unfortunate state to be in. But yeah, that's a big one to me. I see that. That's probably one of the biggest stories that I personally have seen recently, that people are targeting backyard gardens. I have talked about it in the past. I don't like it. If you do have a garden and you wanted to keep it secret, I would encourage you to do so. If you don't want to keep it secret, I would also say that's fine, but think about this sort of stuff as well. And in a real emergency, people would be targeting this sort of stuff. This is what happens, the old, I guess it's a Christian saying, I believe, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Yeah. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. This is exactly the scenario here, that people see food and they go, bang, I'll target it. What you're actually doing there is destroying a micro food system. You're like a locust, because it's going to dissuade or discourage someone from growing vegetables in the future. Or if they do, they're going to be much more reluctant to share those veggies out now, or that produce out. This is why we have to encourage others to grow as well. This is why I always get on here and go, hey, we need to start growing food. We all need to do this. We all need to become preppers on some way, shape, or form. That's my belief, because if everyone is doing it, then we don't have stuff like this. We don't have runs on stupid things like toilet paper, or important things like food, or don't have runs when people need money or whatever it is. We don't have people going crazy over stuff. We don't have people stealing off each other. We don't have people literally stealing the food out of people's mouths. We have a stronger, resilient community that we live in. So again, one of the reasons why I encourage this sort of stuff, and encourage you to encourage it as well in people around you. All right. WEF, the World Economic Forum, has invented a new word to describe the extreme chaos that is gripping our planet. It's not really a new word. It's called a polycrisis. They called it a polycrisis. And I think it's kind of an apt word, really. And I don't know if they coined it, and I don't think it's new at all. And I'm pretty sure I've heard it a number of times in other reports, but interesting that they're picking up on this. They're putting this information out. It's just essentially... they call it polycrisis. I think that's the new age term of what I would term a clusterfuck. It's where you've got a fuck and you're like, oh, fuck, that's bad. But then another one comes along and it gets magnetized to it. And because that's got more gravity now, it pulls in more and more fucks until they're clustered together. That is a clusterfuck. When many, many things go wrong at once and it starts exacerbating by pulling other things in or triggering other things. And that's essentially what they're talking about with polycrisis, is an event that triggers all these other events. And they're talking about this because that's what precipice we're sitting on right now. We have not one system that's going bad, like, oh, our economic system's looking a bit shaky right now. We have multiple different systems that when one goes, it will drag all of them down or affect all the other ones as well. I'm getting through an audiobook at the moment called Mega Threats, which it explains the same sort of thing. Basically, this person goes through, not necessarily going polycrisis like these things coming together, does talk about that, but also talks about how we live in a world now where we have actually built up systems that are so large and complex that they're not just a threat, they're a mega threat. There's too many things connected to them now. Mainstream media is actually coming out. So this is information that, who was reporting on this? CNN came out and said, we're sitting at the worst food crisis in modern history. So the interesting thing about this is I always get up here and say, hey, Africa is like the blind spot to all Western countries. They just don't look at Africa. And I don't know why. Because Africa's a huge continent. It's got a massive amount of people. And there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I've said this a bunch of times, that us not having 3 different varieties of, I don't know, sugar pop cereal on our shelves, and there's only 2 varieties, means that tens of thousands of people are starving to death in Africa. That's how it equates. That's how rich we are in the West. Finally, mainstream media's actually made a report on it. They said, oh, hang on, people are dying in Africa. It's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. And there's a lot more coming. I've talked about this a lot. And I've said this. I don't think it's hyperbole. I don't think it's actually beyond the realm of possibility for in 12 to 18 months' time to see numbers like hundreds of millions starving or dead in Africa. So I think this is a good thing that they're actually picking up on it. But this should be a huge warning to you. Catastrophic food emergency was some of the terms that they were using in this report here. So forewarned is forearmed. This will spread out and this will go everywhere. This is another report coming out of End Times headlines, which I always find interesting for very obvious reasons. 12 products expected to be affected by supply chain shortages and heavy consumer demand in 2023. I always like putting out these little snapshots when other people have looked at this and gone, hey, here's the 10 or the 5 or the 12 in this case. Things that may be in short supply. So again, it's another data point. We can look at this and you can look at this and go, are there any of these things that I use? Can I get ahead of the curve on this? Cereal, bread, and flour. I don't use that so much. Lettuce, I grow that. Champagne, I do not drink. Eggs, yep, I've already talked about that. Prescription medications, I've talked about this a lot in the past. This is something that we should be prepping for. Go out and get over-the-counter medicines that you can now. Stock up on it. Tomato products, I grow them. Cement and concrete, and I want to put in here as well, because there's another one a couple down that I'll advance. Sand. Sand's an aggregate of these products. So this is all tying in with each other. But construction materials on the whole, cement, concrete, sand, that's a problem. Olive oil, I've actually got, I need to do another stock up, but I've generally got anywhere between probably 20 liters plus, anywhere up to maybe 50 of olive oil any given time, depending on how much I'm utilizing at any given time. Bottled water, poultry, talked about that, liquor and beer. I make my own. I do actually make some of my own of those too, but there's another little data point for you guys. If you want to go out and get some of those things and start stocking up on that, that's probably a pretty good idea, because 2023 is not looking good for those products. Renee C says, I watched Joe Rogan with Peter Zeihan, and he was pretty confident that the food crisis would not hit the US. It just seems to be the attitude of most, like it's getting bad but won't get worse. Yes, I have read Peter Zeihan's latest book, The End is Just the Beginning. I've also been watching he's been putting out a lot of videos on YouTube recently, and I'd recommend going and check them out. They're pretty good. He's a pretty cluey guy, very interesting. I don't think he's right on everything that he predicts, but he does explain, he shows he's working out on what he's talking about most of the time. And there is a pretty good case that the US will fare better, that places like Australia also will fare better. And I always say that. We are going to fare better because we have the things set up of these collapses. When the collapses go down, you look at the places that have the right ingredients for things to go okay. US, Australia, both net exporters of food. We make more food than we eat. That's why Peter Zeihan comes out and says things like that. So as long as nothing happens internally to those systems, then we will be relatively okay. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to starve to death. It's not going to be like Africa, where they are a net importer of food. Any country that is a net importer of food, like China, is going to feel the hurt when it comes to the crunch. But things will get worse. Food will get more expensive. It's not going to be beer and Skittles for the rest of time. Peter Rouse says a lot of olive oil are blended with other oils. Yes, you should definitely check that as well. You don't want those seed oils and the shitty friggin' processed oils in there. To be honest, I never heard of him before a friend sent it to me. Well, now you have. Check out Peter Zeihan. German defense minister resigned. Then Poland came out and said they expect Germany to give approval shortly to send Leopard main battle tanks to Ukraine. Interesting timing on both those stories. I'll just leave that one there. Just resigned out of the blue. All of a sudden, hey, Germany, you're going to send Leopard battle tanks into Ukraine. Nothing to see here. Just continue on your life as you were. I'm sure that defense minister wasn't speaking out against any of this. I'm sure they weren't trying to block this sort of stuff. I'm sure they weren't looking at it and going, we actually really need to start concentrating on the German defense force rather than the Ukraine defense force right now. What? You get out. You're going to resign tomorrow. That's what you're going to do. The Belarusian government has said that joint air force exercises sent to commence today with Russia are for defense purposes only, despite increasing concerns that Russia and Belarus may launch an invasion of Ukraine from the Belarusian border. So it has begun. The build-up that everyone's been talking about for a week, 2 weeks, of Russian troops along the Belarusian border. Ukraine's been crying the sky is falling for that entire time, or for actually months now, about Belarus invading them. And then then also reported that Belarus was destroying bridges and setting up mines, which is an odd thing for an invading force to do. A very odd thing for an invading force to do. But, maybe they are going to do it. Well, all the pieces are in place now. They've started those exercises. This is a very similar scenario to earlier in 2022, let's say about January, late January, early February 2022, where we saw Russia pushing a lot of resources into Belarus for exercises. So, interesting stuff happening here. Wait and see what's going to happen. Last one I'm going to just talk about is another supply shortage within Australia. This is up in Mackay, which is far north Queensland. Is Mackay is it classified far north Queensland or just North Queensland or just Queensland? Anyone from Mackay or anyone know Mackay, let me know. But it's up there. It's up at the northern part of the eastern coast of Australia. They're expecting 400 millimeters of rain to hit them. Bit of a storm coming in. So already they've got floods causing issues. They're about to get a lot more. And there's a video here that I was having a look at of Coles, which is one of the two major supermarkets in Australia. So this is a huge supermarket. This isn't like your budget little backwater supermarket. This is a big supermarket. Shelves empty in some parts. Like people just come in, they've done a run on food, they've freaked out. It's an emergency situation, and bang, this is what's happened. Imagine getting there an hour late. Imagine you had to work that day, and then you go, oh, I better go by the supermarket to get some meat or get some fresh veggies or something. Nope, you're too late. You're out. So again, yet another reason for us to get ahead of the curve when it comes to this sort of stuff. Food supply has like, I'm going to say historically, but I'm only talking about the last 10 to 20 years, has been unfathomably solid for us. And now I think it's actually returning to what more realistic levels, where there are ebbs and flows. We've had overabundance for so long. Now we're starting to get ebbs and flows. People will freak out. People will buy it and make it those ebbs a lot worse. So get ahead of the curve. Make sure that you got your own food supply sorted in some way, shape, or form. And remember, this is just caused from a weather event which is not uncommon in a place like Mackay. That's all I'm saying. All right. That's it for today. Renee C says, just lastly, when I lived in far north Queensland, as soon as they mentioned cyclone, things would be sold out. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. People freaking out. You hear that and you're like, no, I need to get to the shops now. I need to buy. You should already have that stuff. I can't think of a worse time to be going out than either just before, like potentially just before a storm or a natural disaster event, or during it. Could not think of a worse time. And Renee C says, I learned to buy up in the dry season. Very, very smart. All right, that's it for today, gang. Thank you very much for joining me. Remember, 8 o'clock tonight on Instagram, going live with that Insta Chicken. We're going to be discussing prepping around a particular event. If you want to, have your say about what event you might want us to talk about, jump into my stories and vote on that. And definitely the top one, maybe the second one, and I might chuck in a weird third one just to have a chat about towards the end. Feel free to join us then, 8 o'clock tonight till about 9 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time in the PM. But apart from that, thank you very much for joining me as always. And remember, Semper Paratus.